Tuesday, in between a seed catalog and a flyer for gutter cleaning, and the first thing I noticed was not my own name. It was the address printed underneath it: Harriet June Vance, 1128 Delaney Street. I have lived at 4 addresses in my life: a rented duplex on Nashua Court, a farmhouse outside Kelso that we gave up after 2 winters, a townhouse on Ivers Road, and the little gray house on Bellamy Street where I am sitting right now. Not one of them was 1128 Delaney Street. Inside was an annual statement from an insurance company called Cordell Mutual Life. Contract number, issue date August of 1996. Owner Harriet June Vance. Accumulated value $60,412.18. Slow. I read that number 3 times standing at the kitchen counter with my reading glasses pushed up into my hair, which is a thing I do and then forget I have done. $60,000. In an annuity I had never opened, at an address where I had never slept a single night, purchased in a year when I was 37 years old and could not have scraped together $600 if the roof had come off. Deep breath. I want to be careful how I tell you this, because for a long time I had it exactly backwards. Not slightly backwards, completely. I spent 11 weeks of my life fighting very hard for the wrong thing, and I was proud of myself the entire time. And the only reason I am telling it at all is that somebody else may be standing at a kitchen counter tonight with a piece of paper that does not fit, and I would like them to look at the part of it that does not fit before they do what I did. My name is Harriet. I am 67. I worked 29 years in the payroll office of a school district, which means I spent my whole adult life reconciling numbers that belong to other people. 640 employees, 4 bargaining units, 3 pay cycles. I was the person they came to when a figure would not sit down. My husband Ray died in the spring of 2019. Heart quick, in the driveway, with the trunk open and the groceries still in the cart. Since then, I have kept a paper ledger on the kitchen table, which my daughter-in-law finds funny, and which has told me the truth about my own money every single month for 7 years. I know what I have. I know what comes in and what goes out. A person like me does not misplace $60,000. So I did what I believed any sensible woman would do. I decided I was looking at identity theft, and I went to war. I called Cordell Mutual at 8 the next morning, and I want you to understand what that first hour was like. A recording asked for my contract number, then my social security number, then my date of birth. All 3 matched. Of course they matched. That was the problem. The machine passed me straight through to a pleasant young woman named Shauna, who called me Miss Vance and asked how she could help me today. I said, "This contract is not mine." She said, "I show you as the owner of record, Miss Vance." I said, "Yes, and that is exactly what I am calling about." We went around that loop 4 times. She could not discuss the contract unless I verified as the owner. If I verified as the owner, then by their system I was the owner, and there was nothing to discuss. It was like being locked out of a room by a door I was holding shut myself. Eventually, she transferred me to a department called Contract Integrity, and a tired man took my statement and gave me a reference number and told me somebody would be in touch within 10 business days. 10 business days. I hung up and stood there with my hand on the phone, feeling the top of my head go cold. Somebody out there was walking around wearing my name. Somebody had my social security number, my date of birth, my middle name spelled out in full, and a company was going to take 2 weeks to think about it. Dramatic. That was the night the real fear started, and I imagine some of you know it. It is not the fear of losing a certain amount of money. It is the fear that there is a second version of you out in the world, signing things, owing things, building a whole paper life that you will only meet when it comes to collect. I called my friend Paulette from church, who has read every article ever printed about protecting yourself, and she came with a legal pad, and we sat at my kitchen table until 11 at night making lists. Freeze all 3 credit bureaus, file a report with the Federal Trade Commission, file a police report so I would have a case number, change every password, order a copy of my Social Security earnings record, put a fraud alert on the bank. I did all of it, every last item on that legal pad. Freezing your credit at 67 is an experience I recommend to nobody. Two of the bureaus took 11 minutes each. The third could not verify me online, asked me about a car loan I had never held, and sent me to an address in Texas with a photocopy of my license. I stood in line at the post office while a woman behind me sighed at how long I was taking. The police report was a call to a non-emergency number and a young officer who was perfectly kind and perfectly clear that nothing was going to happen. He said, "Ma'am, unless there is a loss, there is not much for us." I said, "There is a loss. There is $60,000. He said, "But it is not gone, is it? It is sitting there." And I said, "In my name," which he agreed was odd. And then he gave me a case number and wished me a good evening. Pause. "It is not gone, is it?" He said that on day 4. A young man with a headset told me the truth on day 4 of 11 weeks, and I filed it under things people say when they do not want to do paperwork. I stopped sleeping properly. I would go to bed at 10 and be awake at 2, and by 2:30, I would be at the kitchen table with the laptop, logging into my checking account, my savings, my small pension portal, the state retirement site, one after another, looking for anything that had moved. Nothing ever had. I checked anyway, most nights, for weeks. I started a second ledger, not for money, for the case. Every call, the date, the name, the reference number. 9 pages of it by the 3rd week. When you cannot control a thing, you can at least document it. Sad. And I got angry, which surprised me. I would be in the grocery store with a cart and feel the heat come up the back of my neck at the thought of some stranger sitting somewhere with my name in his mouth. I invented him. I gave him a laptop and a rented room and a list of names bought off the internet. I gave him a face. I had him clearly in my mind for 2 months, and he did not exist at all. 19 days after my first call, a man from Cordell Mutual finally rang me back. His name was Roderick Fain, from what he called the Special Investigations Unit, and he sounded like a man in his 50s who had heard a great many stories and believed roughly half of them. He was thorough. He asked things nobody else had asked. Had I ever authorized anyone to act on my behalf financially? Had I ever been married under a different name? Then he read me the contact details on file and asked me to say yes or no to each. The mailing address, 1128 Delaney Street. No. The telephone number, an old one with an area code that had not covered my part of the state since about 1998. No. The security question, name of your first pet. And the answer recorded was Bitsy. Gasp. I said no. I said no immediately, because I have never had a pet called Bitsy in my life. That was true, and I did not think one thing further about it for 5 weeks, which is the part I have gone over most often since. Then Roderick said something that stopped me. He said, "Mrs. Vance, I have to be straight with you. This is not what fraud usually looks like from where I sit. In an identity case, money leaves. Here, money has been arriving. Somebody has been putting money into this contract on a schedule since 1996. Whoever did this has spent about 30 years making you richer." And I said, "Well, then it is a laundering scheme, or a shell, or they are parking money somewhere they think nobody is looking. I had read about such things." I said it with total confidence. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "That is possible." And I could hear in his voice that he did not think it was possible at all, and that he was too polite to argue with a woman who had already made up her mind. I made him send me the full file. It took 2 more weeks and a signed request, and it came as 51 pages in a flat cardboard mailer. I spread it out on the dining room table and went through it the way I used to go through a quarter-end reconciliation. Here is what was in it, and here is what I made of each thing at the time. The application, dated August 1996, with my name printed and my name signed. The signature was not mine. It was close. It had my slant. But the capital H had a loop at the top that I stopped making at about 15, because a teacher told me it looked girlish. My mother made that loop. My sister made that loop. I decided a forger had copied an old signature card, my middle name written out in full. Harriet June Vance. I have not written June on a document since my marriage license. On everything else, I am Harriet J. But my mother wrote it out every time. Harriet June, on every birthday card. I wrote in my case ledger, uses full middle name, and decided the thief had my birth certificate. A payment history, 31 pages of it. $9,000 deposited to open it in August of 1996. Then a monthly transfer, $50 a month at first, $75 in 2001, $125 in 2006, $200 a month from 2014 onward. Small extra deposits in November most years, between $200 and $400, which I did not understand at all, and one gap, 11 months in 2009 with nothing coming in, and then it started again in December of that year at $50 and climbed back up over the following 4 years. I stared at that gap for a long time. A criminal scheme does not have a bad year and then apologize for it. But I told myself accounts go dormant and cards expire. On page 19, there was a line that said, payor of record, and beside it, M.R. Teague. I looked at that for maybe 4 seconds. M.R. Teague. I thought, that is a company. Some small outfit, Mr. Teague and Associates, the sort of name you see on a strip mall window between a nail salon and a tax office. I searched it online, found a plumbing supply in Ohio and a dentist in Rhode Island, and gave up. My sister's married name was Teague, Maureen Rose Teague. I read her name on page 19 of a fraud file and did not see it. I want to say something about that, because I think it is the truest thing in this whole story. We do not see what we are not looking for. I was looking for a criminal. I had a picture of him, and a woman's initials in a column of a document simply slid under my eyes and out the other side, because Maureen was not in the picture I had made. Now I have to tell you about the address, because that is where it finally cracked. 8 weeks in, a Thursday, I was on hold with the bureau in Texas for the second time about the freeze, and to keep myself from throwing the phone, I pulled up a map on the laptop and typed in 1128 Delaney Street, the way you do when you are only half thinking. The picture that came up was a narrow yellow house with a concrete porch and an iron rail on one side only. There was a maple in the front that had grown enormous. There was a garage set back and turned sideways, and a strip of grass between the drive and the fence, just wide enough for 1 row of tomatoes. Gasp. I put the phone down on the table with the hold music still playing, and I sat there with both hands flat on the wood. That was my mother's house. My mother bought that house in 1981 when I was 22 and already married and living out on Ivers Road. I never lived there. Not one night. I visited, Sundays mostly, and at Christmas, and in the last year of her life more than that. But it was never my address, and I never once wrote the number on anything, because you do not write the number on a card to your own mother. You write Mom on the front, and you hand it to her. Maureen lived there. Maureen moved back in 1990 when things were bad with Dale and stayed until after the funeral. Maureen knew that number the way she knew her own. And here is the sentence that came into my head, whole, with a stranger's hold music still going in my ear. Emphasized. A thief does not choose an address that means something. A thief needs a mailbox he controls, a vacant lot, a mail drop, a rented box, an apartment he is squatting in. He picks it for function. He does not pick a small yellow house on Delaney Street that was sold in 1996 to a young couple named Ostrander, where his mail would bounce back undelivered for 30 years, unless that address means something to him that has nothing to do with getting mail. The address was not a tool. The address was a message. It had just been waiting 3 decades for somebody to read it. Sad. Now I have to tell you the ugly part, the part I am least proud of, because when I understood this was somebody in my family, I picked the wrong person and nearly did something I could not have taken back. I thought it was Gil, my nephew, Maureen's son. Gil is 48. He does drywall and light remodel. He has been up and down financially his whole adult life. A bankruptcy in 2011. and a bad divorce after it. He is also the one who cleared out my mother's house in 1996. He knew that address. He had been in and out of her papers. I built the case in a weekend, and I was very good at it. Motive, access, opportunity, laid out in my payroll handwriting with the columns squared up. I called him on a Sunday evening with a page of notes in front of me and asked him, in a voice I had practiced, whether he had ever used my name or my social security number for anything, ever, even years ago. There was a silence on that line I will hear for the rest of my life. Then he said, "Aunt Harriet, what are you asking me?" I told him about the statement. I told him about Delaney Street. And I said, "Somebody in this family did this, Gil, and I need you to tell me the truth." And he said very quietly, "I would like you to come and see Mom." My sister Maureen was 76 that year, and she had been in a care facility on the north side since February. 2 strokes, 8 days apart, in the winter. The first one took her right side. The second one took her words. I had visited 5 times in 5 months, which is not nothing and is not enough. Every visit I sat in a vinyl chair and talked at a woman who looked at me with my mother's eyes and could not answer, and came away hollowed out and told myself I would go more often. Maureen and I were not close in the way sisters in films are close. She was 9 years older. She raised me half the time, and then she resented having had to, and then she was tired, and then we were 2 grown women who exchanged birthday calls and saw each other at funerals. When our mother died in November of 1994, Maureen was the executor because she was the one who lived there. She handled everything. I was grateful not to have to. Gil met me in the lobby on the Tuesday with a cardboard box under his arm. The kind copy paper comes in, looking like a man who had not slept either. He said, "I only found this in March, when we cleared her apartment. I have been trying to work out what to do with it since." We sat in the family room, which had a fish tank and a jigsaw puzzle nobody was doing, and he took the lid off. Deposit receipts. Hundreds of them. Rubber banded in bundles of 12, 1 bundle per year, going back to 1996. Every one of them a small transfer to Cordell Mutual Life. Contract number ending in the 4 digits I had been reciting into telephones for 2 months. And on the top, in a plastic sleeve, a single sheet of paper, folded in 3, in my sister's handwriting, dated the 12th of August, 1996. Deep breath. I am going to tell you what was in it. In her words, as near as I can hold them. It said, "Harriet, if you are reading this, then either I am dead, or I have finally found the nerve, and I would put money on the first one." It said, "In February of 1995, I gave you a check for $11,200, and I told you that was half of what was left of Mom's estate after the debts. That was a lie. What was left was $67,200. Your half was $33,600. I kept $22,400 of your money, and I have never told a living soul, not Dale, not the lawyer, not the priest." It said, "We were 4 months behind on the house. Dale's crew had walked off the Fairhaven job in September, and there was no work, and there was no money, and I had co-signed on the truck as well. I sat at Mom's kitchen table with the bank statements, and I told myself I would put it back before you ever knew. I was 44 years old, and I was too proud to ask my little sister for help, and so I stole from her instead. There is no better way to say it, and I have stopped trying to find one. It said, I have opened this contract in your name so that it grows for you and not for me. I put in $9,000 today. I will pay in every month for as long as I am breathing. If I do this right, it will be worth more when you get it than what I took. And I know that is not the same thing as not having taken it." And the last line said, "I could not make myself tell you while I still had to look at your face. I'm a coward about this one thing, and I have been for a long time. Please take it, and please, if you can, think of me as somebody who paid." I sat in a room with a fish tank and read that twice. The $9,000 was what she could raise in 1996 when she sold Mom's house and cleared the arrears. The $50 a month was what she could spare. The $75, and then the $125, and then the $200. Was her doing better? The extra deposits every November were on the anniversary of our mother's death. The 11-month gap in 2009 was the year Dale died, and she came back to it in December at $50 starting over. The way you do. And the security question: name of your first pet. Bitsy. Bitsy was Maureen's dog. A small, ugly terrier she had when she was 11 and I was 2, which means she was mine too, in the way that everything of an older sister's is also yours, and I have no memory of her at all. Maureen answered that question honestly. She just answered it about herself. Sad. They had put my sister's whole confession into a form, and none of us could read it. Not the company, not the investigator, not me. It was sitting in their file the entire time. In the address line, in the payor field, in the loop on the H, in the name of a dead dog. I went in to see her that afternoon. She was in the chair by the window with her hair done, because the aide who did Tuesdays was good about that. I sat down and I held her left hand, the one that still worked, and I said, "Maureen, I found the annuity." Pause. Her eyes came round to me. I have thought about that moment more than almost any other, and I cannot tell you for certain what was in them. Fear, maybe. Relief. I have decided to believe it was relief because I am allowed to decide that now. I said, "I am not angry." I said it, and it was true, and it surprised me. She could not speak. She made a sound. She squeezed my hand twice, hard, and then she cried. And the aide came in, and I said, "We were all right. We were all right." We sat there an hour, and I told her about my roses and about nothing at all. She died on the 9th of September. I was there in the morning, and she went in the evening, while I was at home heating soup. Now I have to tell you what my 11 weeks of being right actually cost, because this is not a story where the money arrives, and everybody weeps happily. I had filed a sworn fraud affidavit with Cordell Mutual, with the Federal Trade Commission, with 3 credit bureaus, and with the police. I had stated, under penalty, that I never opened that contract, never authorized it, never received value from it, and that it was procured by fraud. Every word of that was true. That is the thing. Every single word was true. You cannot ring up 9 weeks later and say, "I would like to withdraw all of that. It turns out my sister loved me." I tried. I wrote to Roderick Fain and sent him a copy of the letter. He was decent about it. He said he was sorry, and he sounded like he meant it, and then he explained what was going to happen. A contract procured by a forged application is voidable. Once the company had it in writing from the named owner, the file had gone where those files go. The contract was rescinded, not paid out. Rescinded as if it had never existed, which means the money does not go to the person whose name is on the front. It goes back to the person who actually paid it in. The person who actually paid it in was Maureen, and Maureen was dead. So it went to her estate. And Maureen's estate had a claim against it from the state, because 7 months of skilled nursing care had been paid for by Medicaid, and the state comes after the estate for that. They are entitled to. They sent a very ordinary letter with a very ordinary number on it. Sad $60,412, less the surrender adjustment, less a tax withholding that I still do not fully understand, less the nursing home claim, less the lawyer, less the last of Dale's old medical account that had never been settled. What came to me in the end, in March of this year, was a check for $11,000 and change, emphasized $11,000, 31 years after Maureen handed me $11,200 in her kitchen and told me it was half of everything. I sat in the car in the bank parking lot with that check, and I laughed until I had to put my head down on the wheel, and then I was not laughing. I need to be fair to myself here, because I have not always been. Everything on Paulette's legal pad was correct advice. If a stranger had opened that contract, freezing my credit and swearing that affidavit would have been exactly right. But there is a difference between doing the right thing and doing it with your eyes shut. I had a fact in my hands on day 1 that did not fit my story, and I had another on day 19, and another on page 19 of the file, and I bulldozed past every one of them because I had already decided what kind of story I was in. Quiet. I was frightened, and frightened people want a shape. A thief in a rented room is a shape. It has an outside and an inside, and you know where you stand in it. The truth had no shape at all. The truth was that a woman I had known my entire life did something unforgivable at a kitchen table in 1994, and then spent 11,000 days quietly undoing it, too ashamed to say a word to me, counting on dying first. I do not know what to do with that. Some days I think she was a thief, and some days I think she was the most disciplined penitent I have ever heard of. And most days I think there is no rule that says a person cannot be both at once. She was both. She stole from me, and she paid me back with interest, and she could not look at me while she did either one. Firm. I am not going to tell you she was forgiven and everything was warm. I am angry with her still, in small hard flashes, usually at odd hours. I am angry that she let me hire nobody, tell nobody, ask nobody, for 30 years. I am angry that she made her apology a machine, $50 a month, so she would never have to say it out loud. Money is so much easier than a sentence. She was a Vance, and we are all like that. And I am angry at myself in a different way, which is worse, because I am the one who destroyed it. My sister did the hard thing for 30 years, and I undid it in 11 weeks, with a form and a stamp, and a great deal of certainty. Deep breath. So here is what I have, and then I will let you go. There is always one small thing that does not fit. In every one of these stories, including yours, there is a detail sitting quietly off to the side, and it will not match. And the temptation is enormous to sand it down until it does, because your explanation is nearly perfect and this one thing is spoiling it. Mine was an address. Not the $60,000, not the forged signature, not the dates. Those were all consistent with the story I was telling myself. It was the address, because a thief chooses an address the way you choose a screwdriver for what it does. He picks a mail drop, a vacancy, a box he holds the key to. He does not choose a small yellow house on Delaney Street with an iron rail on one side and a maple in the front, sold in 1996, where not one letter would ever be handed to anybody. Slow. No thief chooses an address that means something. Only a person who loved somebody there does that. I looked at that address for 8 weeks, and I saw an obstacle. It was never an obstacle. It was the whole confession, printed in the window of the envelope, on the very first day, before I ever picked up the telephone. Softly. So if a piece of paper comes to your house and something on it is wrong, I would ask you to do one thing before you do anything else. Before the calls, before the freezes, before you decide what kind of story you are in. Find the detail that does not fit. Sit with it. Ask it, gently, why it is there. Ask who would have chosen it and what it would have to mean to them. Because the wrong small thing is almost never a mistake. It is usually the only honest part of the whole page. Sad I keep the letter in the drawer of the kitchen table now, next to my ledger. And on the first Tuesday of every month, I put $50 in an envelope for the animal shelter on Coleridge Road, and I write Bitsy in the memo line, which no one there understands and no one has ever asked about. It is not restitution. There is nobody left to pay. It is just a small thing I do, every month, without saying anything to anyone. Quiet.